books of Dr Seuss are no stranger to parents and their children alike, and this holiday favorite about a green antisocial creature is really no exception. That's, of course, the Grinch, and we'll be looking at the 1966 original animated version, as well as the remakes in 2000 and 2018. I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds.
Hello there.
And yeah, I had a few different kind of things that came up in as a, in my mind as a topic of discussion to start off with. The thing though that maybe it's a little bit kind of relevant to some of the things we talked about offline and stuff like that, is that we tend to have this kind of idea that, past is bad, and anything new is good, quote unquote. And I feel like that's almost in a way related to not only commercialism, but even what we had with the Brave New World discussion, where that somehow we've gotten brainwashed into this idea that the new shiny object and stuff is the way to go on things. So I was just kind of wondering what your thoughts about that after all these remakes and originals and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we like to get sold on that, and people like to sell us on the idea of things that are getting better and improving. Whether you drink the Kool-Aid or whether it is actually kind of empirically or subjectively better is up for debate. But there's always a thirst for novelty and new things, regardless of whatever it is. And you see that in everything, media, objects and devices. You see the new Apple AirPods Max have been announced that look like a 70s pair of headphones, and yet people are going crazy for it. I mean, I know there's a lot of nice technology in it, but style-wise, so it's very cyclical, and it's very kind of, as long as something new is coming out, it will get our attention, basically.
Yeah. And I guess, certainly that ties into nice discussion about there's nothing like under the, Christmas tree, that shiny package, and then inside this, shiny toy that, your parents have gotten you. So it's really kind of one of those things, right? That we've kind of almost made a, not only tradition, but it's just kind of we have a Pavlovian response, right, to that kind of, shiny thing that, we get each Christmas and stuff. And there's this kind of fuzzy feeling that we all get, that another year we've been able to kind of successfully, kind of survive COVID or whatever. And, now we're celebrating entry into the new year. So.
Yeah, I think it depends on how cynical your parents are and what kind of environment your home is like. I think my daughter's thing is well, why don't we have Christmas lights around the house? And what kind of, is this more or less presents than I had last year? This is it's more like an earnings report than it is a heartwarming scene. But I mean, it's, and I think that's going to be the strange thing this year, is that certainly where we are, there's no real, you can't have big get-togethers with loads of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people are kind of not bothering, it's should I really put all these decorations up and have an open fire if no one's coming round or anything like that? So it's going to be a strange one this year.
And here in Southern California, there's this kind of ironic twist that, to that, where basically, come rain or shine, and more often it's shine here. Yeah. And they still got to have the Christmas decorations, and meanwhile they're decorating palm trees instead of, kind of evergreen and stuff. But yet, damn it, we've got to have our Christmas decorations and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's so go on. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's just kind of one of those kind of bizarre things about this area and stuff, that people, there's this kind of almost idea of Christmas that's more important than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that sort of circles back to the Grinch quite nicely, really, in that it's kind of his. I mean, you can kind of see, and I talked about a very superficial understanding of Christmas. It's basically what the Grinch represents in the book. because he sees all this noise, he sees the presents,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just like, well, what masks sort of commercialism and a lot of
Right.
racket. I don't much like the look of this. And really, it's only through kind of trying to interact with other people that he starts to sort of realize what Christmas might be about.
Well, I mean, Dr. Seuss really geniusly just kind of retold like the Ebenezer Scrooge story,
Yeah.
Just without the ghosts and all that kind of stuff. He just cuts right to the chase. And then, it's amazing that I didn't realize that the original version was only barely 30 minutes long and stuff. I in my mind as a kid, I seem to remember it being at least an hour long and everything. So that just goes to show you kind of the attention span, I guess, of a child, right? Stuff. And I mean, it's got the magic of Chuck Jones, of course, who's known for the Tom and Jerry cartoons and stuff. And we see some of that kind of animation kind of touch to things and stuff. And then it achieves in 10 minutes, the storytelling that these remakes take over an hour to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, you can't really charge people for a movie and it only be half an hour long.
Right.
But I mean, the original is obviously very faithful to the book.
Oh yeah.
Was it Boris Karloff doing the voice?
Yeah.
So he's sort of, I mean, he's perhaps a bit too menacing, I would say, in a way, as the Grinch. He sort of brings it down a bit too. It's a bit too sort of bleak with Boris Karloff doing the voiceover, but effective nonetheless. And it's it's very faithfully kind of animated, I would say, in keeping with the visual style of the book,
right?
Which is really nice. And I mean, what's nice about a lot of Dr. Seuss's stuff is his visual kind of touch for the surreal. It's something that's just, even any of his books really, why they're probably so engaging, is that there's this really real kind of improvisational kind of surreal flair to a lot of the artwork in it. And I think obviously that's very faithfully reproduced in the animation. In the remake, I think they tried to kind of keep to that spirit with obviously a lot more money in the production. But what's interesting, actually, if you've ever get the chance to look at it, is his own personal collection of artwork. There's a whole series of pictures and paintings that he's done, which has a lot of the characters from the books, but in kind of totally different situations. There's the cat in the hat, but he's at in a bar playing pool and sort of smoking a cigarette and things like this. And another one of the cats just there looking slightly morose. And it's they're just really, really interesting pictures, and some of them just very much more kind of abstract, almost impressionist sort of versions of what you would see in the books. So they're really, really fascinating, and maybe I'll try and find some links and we can put them in the description.
Yeah, it's to me one of the things that always struck me about Dr. Seuss is that it's very adult kind of ideas that he really doesn't it's in very simplistic kind of the rhyme that we kind of all know and stuff for Dr. Seuss books and stuff. That's very simple in terms of kind of the rhythm, in terms of the wording and stuff like that. But it's kind of stuff that I mean, as an adult you'd really kind of get and stuff. And then it also, meanwhile, kids get it too. So it's kind of in other words. He achieves in something that I think that a lot of these movies that are in theory made for kids really struggle with and stuff. And it was actually the other question I kind of wanted to talk about was kind of what is it about kind of sometimes these movies or cartoons even and stuff like that where they try to pander or cater to the kids but they fail in the end because I don't know kind of that it's almost like it seems like they were maybe trying too hard or something.
Yeah, it's a very difficult balance to strike with children's television or movies. It's getting something that's genuinely entertaining, but something that doesn't pander, that doesn't sort of be too sort of obvious or dumb for the kids. So they're just it's boring. Or something that actually, and I think a lot of shows are a bit guilty of this, of trying to pander too much to the parents. And they have stuff that's too kind of adult, and the kids don't get half of the show. But you as an adult can kind of go, oh yes, that's what it should be there. But I mean, I think the other the other thing that's very obvious in Dr. Seuss's books is there's a certain sort of elegance to everything. I mean, you have to remember he was a satirical cartoonist for newspapers for a long time. So he has this real gift of taking a scene and sort of putting a spin on it that makes you question what's going on within that scene, even if it's, you know, something that's actually about letters. And I kind of think in a way he's sort of making fun of other children's learning tools in a way, because if you read them, they're sort of things like I can't remember, like red fish, blue fish, fat fish, thin fish, and then it's kind of like, you know, it's something that's kind of he adds his own by adding the sort of nonsense words that he creates in this. He's kind of actually in some way kind of making fun of this whole process of learning language. And it's really entertaining still, even as a parent, to read them, because you're just like, well, why has he just thrown some, you know, you're programmed to look at these kind of kids books and think, oh, okay, they've got to be learning something from this. But like about 20 to 30% of Dr. Seuss's books is him just teaching gibberish to children. But they love it, you know, they love that. That for me is really kind of interesting. There's this real kind of reflective element to a lot of his books.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I almost feel like kind of he is doing the opposite, you know, like kind of where, like you said, the if you look at kind of the Dick and Jane books, right, it's kind of like ridiculously dumbed down, and he's almost like kind of doing like kind of the same kind of, you know, Dick and Jane kind of thing, but it's like he's putting it in, like you said, gibberish or like kind of, you know, nonsensical kind of connections or ideas in there and stuff like that, just to kind of, like you said, poke fun at, you know, like kind of this other like kind of, you know, like, and he's doing it like kind of in a very indirect way that like it's kind of, you know, like you said, yeah, when if you're an adult, you're kind of like looking at it, you kind of you can see the, you know, what he's kind of jabbing at and stuff, but meanwhile he's not actually like directly jabbing at it and everything, like, you know, it's very subtle, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, so going back, I actually remembered now the rhyme from the book, but it's one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish.
Right.
But you see what he's done is, you know, most kids' books are like one, this, two, that, three, that, four, that. But, you know, he's just like, well, after two comes red. And then after red, obviously, comes blue. You know, it's sort of, he's just, and that's what's kind of funny about it. Because I think even as a child, you see people are trying to teach you these very structured patterns. And he just comes along and just like, well, after a cow comes, you know, a horse, and then after a horse comes a trumpet. So which is you know, it's very simple stuff, but it's quite sort of subversive in a way, which is quite fun in a way. And there's another real pattern in a lot of his books in that things start off very simply and then they get progressively more complex. And that's a theme in a lot of his books, like, you know, The Cat in the Hat is all about you know, the paint getting thrown, or is that the Cat in the Hat Returns? I don't know, but anyway, you know, things start off very simple. It's just like, oh, we got to paint this wall, but then the paint gets everywhere and blah, blah, blah. But I think that kind of, that feeling of something, we're trying to teach you something simple, and then our teaching has kind of got out of control, because the story that we thought we were telling you isn't the one we're telling you. We're now telling you about like snow that's covered pink, and what are we going to tell like the parents when they come home and they see that like all this pink snow everywhere? It's, you know, it's not really how you would, it's a very kind of unexpected sort of way, and it changes every page more or less. Something sort of even more kind of silly happens. So, and the art style reflects that as well. There's always sort of very inconceivable things of houses that are supported by very thin things, or you know, trumpets that have like ludicrously long kind of like horns that go on for like miles and stuff like this. You know, stuff that kind of defies all physical reality. So yeah, they're a lot of fun, I think, even still today. And my daughter loved them actually. We bought all of them, and it was one of the main things that really got her into reading actually.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it as well, is that like that, you know, here's something you know, that it's really easy for the kids to kind of really get into and stuff like that. And then as a parent, your goal is just simply to, get your kids to be reading and everything. And then like, what's called, it's funny because on the one hand, if you're more, I don't know, the kids have to learn something that's like, really structured, this and that. If that was more the issue, then yeah, this wouldn't work and everything. But if your goal is simply like, I just want my kids to read, right, stuff, then the fact that like, this is something that they like, and then something that like, is really, I can see that like, hey, it's not doing any harm and stuff like that. Sure, I gotta, have at it, that kind of thing. And it's also, I think, one that like, where the kids probably pretty quickly, like they start reading it themselves. I think that's the other kind of thing that he somehow, achieves by the rhyme, the kind of, really, it's not simple. I guess that's the word I keep going back to, but it's something that like, but it's like kind of just really works, like kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reassuring thing of the pattern in that, you know that if this word rhymes at the end of this, the end of this sentence, the next sentence is going to rhyme. So I'm going to be pretty certain. It's building that kind of confidence in the reading. That the next line is going to end in a certain sound and everything. So that's quite nice for children to have that repetition and the reinforcement as they go through it, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of musical, I guess, in a way, and certainly, like a good part of the Dr. Seuss kind of, animations and stuff like that is, kind of these songs that they kind of make, and and then the Grinch, of course, has like a few different songs that like kind of like they're kind of iconic and everything like that. And I think that's the thing that like kind of really also, like I forget who like kind of talked about it, but they basically, have kind of pointed out like kind of how music is really, enhances learning and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. I'd not really thought of that, but I know that there's stuff that playing a musical instrument sort of staves off dementia apparently. So I'm sure rhythm, repetition, all these kind of things are very useful in learning. I mean, in a way though, I have to say I'm not a fan of the song in the original 1966 one.
Interesting.
I don't know. It's just, I think as well for me, I guess I'm just so used to reading the books that having the animated version of it loses a bit of the what one of the joys of a Dr. Seuss book is turning the page over and being surprised by the artwork. And there's not much surprise because it's a character sort of moving along. So it's faithful, but it loses some of that kind of I don't know, that nice sort of freshness that you get.
Interesting.
In the page.
Yeah, I guess for me it's just the faithfulness, like kind of, and it's just kind of really like just to me almost like, besides it being a holiday classic, it's so easy to watch, like kind of like something watching it like kind of less than 30 minutes was a really surprise, I guess. Like that was my surprise, I guess.
Yeah, it's nice for us because we normally sit through about 4 hours of movies every week to do one of these comparisons. So this was a nice quick one this week. But I mean it's very faithful. It's kind of quite, I wouldn't describe it as that much fun though. Really, it's kind of interesting in a way. But I mean, it's definitely one of his more. I mean, I would say The Grinch Who Stole Christmas is kind of the closest thing to a satire, really, that he did with his children's books. There's not many others I can think of off the top of my head that I really like in the same kind of vein.
Yeah, it's probably the one that I guess does the most to poke fun at commercialism and stuff, like where the other ones are more like kind of environmental kind of themes and stuff, or just kind of things like that. Like it's a little bit more global, I guess, in some ways. But this one was definitely taking a real jab at like the fact that like well, maybe you were getting a little too commercial there.
Yeah, one thing that really sticks in my head when watching the original one and reading and the book is him referring to their Christmas dinner as roast beast.
Oh, okay.
And I just think of so much of his artwork is about bringing sort of things, giving creating weird animals,
Yes.
or putting them in lots of different sort of scenarios and things like this, and it just describing like a turkey. It's not like a turkey; it's just a roast beast.
No, yeah.
And it makes me wonder like what his actual attitudes were to eating meat and veganism and all this kind of thing.
Right.
There's something very odd about that whole kind of line in there. That it's just like you're eating an animal. It's a roast animal. It's kind of very kind of, yeah. I don't know. It just stuck in my head when I watched it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because he has like green eggs and ham, and then I want to say like other times, like he doesn't seem to kind of have that separation stuff. But this one, yeah, like it is pretty. It does stick out though, like kind of that he kind of specifically says, like kind of roast beast and stuff. So.
I mean, I think in a way, the Grinch is kind of like he's a 21st century role model in some respects. Oh. Because he's disgusted by them eating roast beast, so he's obviously a vegan. He's anti-commercial.
Right.
He from the movie, at least with Jim Carrey, he's taking all the rubbish and reusing it. So he's big into recycling. He's very environmentally friendly, and he's kind of very isolated in his own world. Probably, all he needs is the internet. And he'd probably be a YouTuber.
No. And then what's called? He also hates being discriminated for his color. So
absolutely, yeah, quite right too. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know of anything else that's kind of worth discussing it. I guess for me, it's mostly just the kind of perennial classic that it's become and stuff. I guess as we move on to discussing the other ones, it's kind of just as much as the book, it's become like the source material, I think, for any other future versions that we'll see. Which as you and I know, like it's some point it'll be coming again. And in fact,
well, it has.
I was gonna say there's even been like a couple musical versions of stuff on Broadway and even on live TV and stuff. Apparently that we didn't cover for this time, but yeah.
No, there was actually a much more recent remake as well, which I think was from the animation studio that does Despicable Me, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, the 2018.
Yeah, I watched that. I mean, I don't know if we're going to compare that in this or if we're just doing the Jim Carrey version.
Yeah, I mean, what's called? I actually watched it as well, and
Oh, you did? Okay.
I'm definitely glad to talk about it and stuff. And there's a lot of things actually I think I really like about it, for very different reasons and stuff. But yeah, so but yeah, well, I guess let's cover the Jim Carrey version first.
That's right. Yes. We're not even mentioning the year like we normally. It's just the Jim Carrey version because it's basically the Jim Carrey show. But yeah, I mean, obviously they had to pad it out quite a lot. We've got some very expensive visual effects to make everyone in a live action cast look like Who's now, and lots of sort of interesting set design trying to mimic Dr. Seuss's artwork. And I think they actually, don't know if they won an Oscar, if they got nominated for it, but the visual kind of design and everything was quite highly praised at the time. And I like it in a way from that aspect. I think they did a really good job visually with the sets, and I don't know if those, because they look like they forced everyone's noses up in doing that makeup. And I just thought, that's like horribly uncomfortable for people, or was it just really cleverly disguised and it kind of, but it looks painful, which I think good, well done, looks good. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, that's like overall the thing of like where they basically were forcing onto the physical realm, I guess, so to speak, all the things from the animated one, and like it's done to great effect. I mean, it's you can tell, like you said, there's lots of details, lots of attention to it, and certainly the budget to kind of support it and stuff like that. But the biggest question I have is like, okay, you've done all this, but who are you really making this for? That's the thing that like wasn't clear to me, like kind of from this version. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts about that, but I felt like they tried to make it for the kids and try to make it for the adults, but I feel like in the end, it just seems to kind of fall in this kind of uncanny valley for kind of audiences and stuff.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, it does. There's bits that are just very kiddie and bits that are very adult. I mean, really adult, really. For for the source material. So it just, they just kind of thrown everything and just be like, here we go. So I mean, it's sort of, I think it's quite good in a way. And I mean, I like the way they kind of they try to encapsulate the spirit of things starting off simple and getting progressively more out of control. I mean, I did quite enjoy the scene where he's invited to the what is it, the jubilation.
Oh, okay.
And he basically just starts on criticizing commercialism, and then ends up by burning the tree down and just destroying the whole place. And I thought that was quite good. It was kind of keeping in that spirit. I mean, it's not quite in the same style, because really, if it was more like the books, it would get more and more surreal. Whereas this just gets more kind of like an action movie or something. But I mean, I admire the fact they tried to do something along those lines. And Jim Carrey is pretty surreal and quirky, and he's quite fun to watch. I'm sure good 20-30% of it was all improvised. And so, I mean, he's not really the Grinch, so to speak. It's just like watching Jim Carrey, but dressed up in the Grinch's costume. But I mean, it's still quite entertaining. I quite like Jim Carrey. Just because he's that kind of, it's easy for sort of highbrow people to get quite upset with watching Jim Carrey movies and quite enjoy some of his more lowbrow stuff. But it's I sort of strangely enjoyed it, actually. I mean, of course, the other thing is they got the whole backstory in this one.
Yes.
I sort of strangely enjoyed it, actually. I mean, of course, the other thing is they got the whole backstory in this one.
Yes.
Because any remake, you can't just have someone who's a loner who just is kind of anti-commercial. They have to have a terrible traumatic reason for being a social outsider. They're not allowed. We're back in Brave New World territory again. You're not allowed to be introspective and alone at any period of time without having something wrong with your mind. So they've created this whole backstory of him being traumatized in front of the girl he loves. It was a bit, that all felt very kind of thrown in there and padded, and that was probably the most tiresome bit of the whole movie, really.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, like, I'd say the other kind of, criticism I have for is that, like, what was the real kind of, I guess the purpose of it was to show why he was so, I guess, against Christmas and stuff. That it was actually because of this trauma and everything. At the same time, though, like, we didn't know all that from the original and stuff. And was anything missing from the original because of that? Like, I guess that's the thing that, like, when you have all this, it's like, what does it really do to kind of advance things and stuff? And maybe it can be said that, like, it helped to, like, kind of make it clear why, like, kind of he was so against things and stuff. But I guess that's the thing that, like, I struggle with different times when I see something like this, is that, like, does it really, like, help things to move forward then, or is it like kind of just like, okay, we're just going all to this back territory? And I've been on that lately because of I kind of been just kind of going back to some of these different stories and stuff, and, like, looking at, like, the basic storytelling ideas behind it. In other words, not so much that, like, where does it kind of justify things, but as does it kind of allow the story to kind of progress and flow and stuff. And I think that's the thing that, like, when you have something like this, it feels like it really was just not only taking a step back, but just, like, kind of just really spending time that, like, in the end, like, besides, like, the flow, but also, like, does it keep you engaged as an audience and stuff? And I feel like it really kind of loses things, like, kind of, because it spent so much time there and stuff. I mean, granted, like you said, people pay, like, kind of, their X number of dollars and stuff, and even back in 2000 and everything, that they want, at least, 90 minutes worth of entertainment, if it's not a couple hours and stuff. But if in the end, like, kind of, I don't know, the popcorn's kind of running out and stuff, and I don't know, maybe that's the point. Like kind of, you know, like if you drag things long enough, they'll go and buy another Coke or something like that. And
I think that's a very risky strategy for movie making. It's like, we just make this 20 minutes really boring. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of definitely, if you're paying money and you're taking your children to the cinema, it's 2 hours where you don't have to keep them amused. So
right.
Yeah, you're gonna want every minute of that so that you can relax and maybe check your phone or something like this. But, get in your Buddha box, as they call it on South Park. But yeah, I mean, it's it's very unnecessary, and it pulls the story in two different directions rather than on it being about, you know, the more social and empathic message of Christmas and versus commercialism. It becomes kind of like the Grinch's backstory of like how he was traumatized. I mean, one of them, but I mean, you got to hand it to Jim Carrey. He takes that and kind of runs with it and does some quite funny things with it. Like, I mean, in the story where he starts stealing everything from people's houses with the tree, and Cindy Lou Who catches him, and she says, you know, why are you doing this? And he just bursts through and says, for vengeance. And that for me was really, you know, that's obviously not in the original. But that was, for me, was, you know, he does lots of stuff like that to play with their new interpretation of it. So hats off to him for going with it. But it's all very kind of like, you know, it's just padding, really.
Yeah, and I got to give credit to the young actor, you know, Taylor Momsen, who played Cindy Lou, and she's phenomenal. I mean, you know, she's definitely like kind of, you know, like it takes somebody like you know, as a child actor too, like to kind of to hold up a performance that, you know, is strong enough to somebody like Jim Carrey. It's got to not be easy and stuff, but she pulls it off. And I mean, you know, granted, she's once again, ironically, she's only done limited things after that and stuff, but still, like, kind of, you know, I mean, for whatever moment between the casting, whatever else, like, you know, they picked, like, you know, you know, like almost like perfect, I guess, kind of actor to kind of play the role and stuff like that. She really just shines, like, kind of as this innocent kind of, you know, like kid with a heart of gold and stuff. Yeah, no, and someone who's not afraid of the Grinch as well. That's right. That sort of makes you appeal to her as a character. Yeah.
And I mean, I think the whole reason they did the whole backstory as well is so that they could have the Grinch being horrible and doing things, and you still feel kind of sorry for him in a way. So, yeah, it's. But I mean, we've seen the same kind of mechanic used in horror remakes as well, in that they feel compelled to explain the behavior.
Right.
This whole thing of, you can't just have someone who's just randomly evil or randomly, you know, misanthropic or something like that. They have to have, it has to be the parents' fault, or something has to have happened to them to explain this behavior. So, but I mean, overall, I actually kind of enjoyed it. I had to fast forward the odd song or two to keep my sanity, but overall, you know, I'll quite happily watch Jim Carrey doing some silly improvisation for a best part of 2 hours.
I mean, I'll tell you that song, you know, "Where Are You Christmas" is one that, like, you know, stuck in my head from that time period and stuff. And I totally forgot about it until it came on again. I was like, oh, that's where it's from. Like, because that song, like, I think was more popular than the movie at the time and stuff like that. At least here in the States, yeah.
Okay, I completely missed the boat on that one.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, but overall, actually, I think I had. I mean, it was a bit tedious at times, but I kind of had more fun with that than I did with the animated version, I think, in a way.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that. I actually thought that the animated version was pretty entertaining. Like, you know, like it surprised me. Like, you know, kind of, you know, whereas I found it hard to, you know, other than Jim Carrey, found it hard to, like, laugh at, you know, much of the 2000 version, but the 2018 version struck me for some reason, like, kind of, you know, I think for me it was a lot of the dynamics between, you know, the animated Grinch and you know, Max and stuff. Like, there was just kind of like a lot of chemistry that they were able to achieve through animation that, like, I felt like, you know, the live version, like, the dog was kind of, you know, it was cute and stuff like that, but it just didn't really, I think for me, like, having a anamorphic version of Max like kind of worked more. Like you get to see like kind of these expressions and stuff, and like kind of and so it to me like that's kind of like the Grinch reality and stuff more so than like as animated as Jim Carrey was and stuff like that, but they only got so much of a performance from kind of the live action dog and everything.
It's funny. Max is quite interesting. I mean, doesn't have many lines, but he's an interesting character, so to speak. There's a lot of expressiveness. He's almost like the friend who watches another friend self-destruct but sticks with them even though they're going down a bad path, so to speak. It's kind of what I would say about Max. But
I mean, that's what we love about dogs, right? That they're faithful to the end.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not a dog person, so I can't comment, but I'll take your word for it. Yeah, no, I mean, so the 2018 version, interestingly, I did watch it and not too long ago, probably about 6 months, maybe a year ago.
Wow, okay,
well,
okay.
I'm guessing actually now I think about it, probably right around Christmas last year.
Sure.
And I did not, I remember not enjoying it at all.
Interesting.
I remember thinking it was really boring from what I remember. And I just didn't. It's Benedict Cumberpatch, isn't it, as the Grinch?
And I wouldn't have guessed that. Like just the voice, like kind of, like to me, like in my mind, like kind of his voice sounds a certain way. And I know he's done different voices, including, of course, Smog and everything like that. But for me, like, like if I, like sight unseen or like kind of if I didn't know from kind of looking it up and stuff like that, I just never would have guessed that that's who it was.
Yeah. I think I just found it all very boring when I watched it.
Okay.
It seemed to be quite slow. And it certainly didn't have the zany humor. And it didn't have the short running time of the original.
No,
so, yeah. And I mean, obviously the animation is much slicker, but I don't think it, again, I think it kind of missed the mark a little bit on the surreal elements. And I was expecting more because... And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain it was the same people that did Despicable Me. But I that's one of the things I like about the Despicable Me movies and Minions and all that is that they do have this kind of quite nice sort of surreal touch to a lot of the art style.
Right.
Yeah, I've got to look it up because I'm so curious to see who it was that actually did it. And it's got Pharrell, narrating it as well.
Yeah.
Which was okay, I guess. He's not quite up there with Anthony Hopkins though, and that was actually one thing I did like about the 2001 was that I like the fact that they kept all of the original book in there but narrated rather than being spoken by the characters.
Okay.
The fact they still sort of got that.
So Chris Meledandri, I guess, is like the producer of the Despicable Me franchise.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
but I mean, I just thought you could go for something a lot more surreal and psychedelic with the Dr Seuss adaptation, and I'm just a bit disappointed they didn't do more of that. Really,
I just felt like for me the 2000 version was so like overloaded. I felt like I was getting a headache from like kind of just being bombarded like kind of by the like the surreal kind of color palettes and kind of just and meanwhile I felt like the Grinch, this 2018 version, was tight enough that like it was colorful and it felt very much like a this Whoville seemed like a Christmas decoration, just kind of like the way it's described in the book and stuff like that, but it felt like a place that'd be kind of cool to explore and stuff, like in a video game or something like that. So that to me is like kind of what it felt like. And then overall, the other thing was that like I felt like it really appealed to the maker kind of kind of crowd that the people that over the past X number of years, like people have been really into like kind of the whole new Lego thing now where you can basically program and all that kind of stuff. And because like not only did the Grinch have all these kind of cool gadgets and stuff, but then also even Cindy Lou, like she was actually she in the end to combat him or to trap him and stuff like that as Santa was also she came up with her own kind of elaborate trap and everything like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. No, that's coming back to me now. But again, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of overly smart children in movies.
Okay,
a lot of the time it's kind of a bit Home Alone-y, you know. I kind of Home Alone was great and everything, but we could have left it there, you know. but we saw that with the we talked about it last week, didn't we, with Miracle on 34th. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, like to me, it was, you know, just the fact that like it seemed to have this, what's called the original kind of source material, but then it put a more modern spin that like you know, just kind of more gadget oriented stuff like that. It was in some ways you can definitely see the kind of Despicable Me aspect, right, where it's kind of like similar, like where you had like kind of these goofy gadgets and stuff like that, and kind of and the other thing I think that kind of, you know, again, like kind of it was really came down to the dynamics of between the Max and Grinch, kind of that really worked and stuff like that. And then they added this reindeer Fred. That I thought that was actually a pretty entertaining addition. That like here's this, you know, reindeer that got drafted and stuff unwittingly, like. And then they had this weird goat that like would scream at the top of his lungs. I thought that was another element that like I also, you know, found entertaining. Like you know, it was totally bizarre and like kind of had very little to do with like the original Grinch and stuff. But for me, it worked. I guess it like kind of just these little kind of touches, you know, just kind of really pulled it off for me and stuff in the end.
Okay. Yeah. As I say, I don't remember it appealing very much, but
right.
Yeah. Maybe it's under my hadn't read the book close enough to watching it or something like that. But yeah, it veers quite a lot though, doesn't it? I mean, I don't think it has. Does it? I suppose it has the original book as narrated by Pharrell in it, though.
Pharrell,
right?
Yeah. I mean, they kind of did the kind of little bit, what's called a little bit of kind of rewriting for some of the stuff. But for the most part, it was pretty faithful. And I felt like that's kind of like, you know, given all three versions and stuff like that, I say they really stuck with the basic kind of idea that like when it came down to it, you know, it was the big, you know, kind of climactic moment of like kind of this mound of presents and stuff, and you know, on top of this, you know, mountains and everything, and that, you know, the Grinch had to like, you know, either what's called just toss it all or like kind of, you know, finally find his heart and stuff like that. And I think like it was interesting how like each had its own kind of approach to this and stuff. And then this one, it was just the fact that like it was more about him recognizing like kind of the humanity that like despite like you know that they still didn't even without the president still found the spirit of Christmas and stuff. I feel like they kind of went back to that to some degree, and that to me like kind of worked for that moment and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. There was no backstories or anything like that in the 2018 version, was there? Which was, I mean, yeah.
If there was, it was. I think it was a really short one. It was like basically, yeah. They kind of did like a little bit of flashback from what I remember now, like where they show like a smaller version of Grinch. But it was like really quick. It was like basically like, you know, a few minutes and stuff like that, if even.
Yeah. No, I think it's so good.
And there wasn't like kind of this kind of bizarre kind of love triangle thing and stuff like that. I think that was another thing that kind of really turned me off about the 2000 version, to be honest. Like,
it was unnecessary, wasn't it? Really. I mean, Jeffrey Tambor was quite good in it. It was a very serviceable part that he's got in it, but yeah, it was totally surplus to requirement at the same time.
Christine Baranski, I mean, I tend to like think of her as like kind of what's it called from Big Bang Theory as the mother, not of
oh yeah,
I forget the name of like the character,
but Sheldon's mum, I want to say.
I think the other one, like
Oh, no, you're right. Yeah, no, it's not Sheldon's mum.
Leonard's
mum.
Yeah, the psychologist. Right, So I tend to think of her as like kind of, you know, like this cold, like, you know, analytical, you know, woman, stuff like that. And then so for her, like, you know, she like, I don't know, it was kind of really, like they really heightened her sexuality, something like that. Like when like they basically had to push up something or other, and it was kind of like almost like just added to like kind of like this. I don't really want to go there kind of thing and stuff.
Yeah, it was there. They definitely did that. Of course, they mushed her face up with all of the weird.
Right.
Who knows?
On top of everything else, like kind of that really made me not want to go there and stuff.
Yeah. So how would you rank your Grinches then? Where would you put your?
I'd have to go with the classic to be like kind of just like it's just kind of the default champion, I guess, so to speak. But I actually give the animated version like a lot of points for like just to me like it's. I felt like it was very watchable and stuff like that. Just for all the different reasons we talked about. And then like the 2000 versions, like if you have nothing else better to do on a holiday night and stuff, and Jim Carrey lights your boat, then go for it and stuff.
Yeah. Well, for me, actually, I'm going to be rather controversial here, and I'm going to go for the Jim Carrey as my number one pick.
Okay.
Just because, I don't know. I think it imbues that spirit of chaos and surreality from the books, even though it's not faithful at all. Then I'd probably go for the Chuck Jones animated one from '66, and then I'd have the 2018 right on the bottom because I just found it so boring.
I would not have guessed that. Like kind of, before we talked, I just would not have guessed, because I suspected you like Despicable Me and stuff like that, and then I would have like guessed that like it kind of is by the same people and kind of relatively kind of same animation stuff like that. So who knew?
Yeah, maybe the Who's in Whoville, but no one else. So yeah, I guess on my rather poor joke there, what do we got lined up next?
Well, to kind of round off our holiday looks and stuff like that, we'll finish off with kind of in some ways we haven't done horror for a few weeks now, something like that. So we'll look at Silent Night, Deadly Night, not to be confused with Silent Night, Bloody Night, to kind of finish things off.
Oh, right, there's two. Okay.
And I think that'll be our kind of conclusion for this year's holiday looks at the originals versus remakes, and then we'll be looking on to some other kind of movies, probably more along the lines of the standard before, and of course we'll be going back to horror at some point because Lord knows there's so many of them.
I mean, it wouldn't be our channel if we didn't go back to horror every 3 or 4 weeks at least. So yeah.
So once again, I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds. Thanks for watching, and we will see you at the movies.